This is the Corgi Junior's Fiat X19 that we last saw a couple of weeks ago, and I said then that it looked like a pretty good candidate for mirror polishing, and that's exactly what I'm going to do. So this is going to get the Spectraflame style finish. I'm having another break from the Mercuries. They'll be back next week. I just want a few videos where we concentrate on some other things and get them caught up a little bit, because it's occurred to me that there's quite a few of these 25 cars that I started that haven't really touched yet. Now, the main focus of this episode is not just to mirror polish this and then do the thing with the airbrush and give it like the Spectraflame finish and whatever. I am going to give it a Spectraflame style finish, but just not with the airbrush. So this one's going to be aimed at people who've packed in spray painting for the year. I can see why you might do that. I mean, not everybody's got a cellar, and even then, you can get caught out if there's too much moisture. It'll either ruin the paint outright or just give you a very disappointing finish in terms of orange peel and things like that. That often happens when there's too much moisture in the air. So I can see why people just completely give it up at this time of year. I mean, yeah, I can go down the cellar and keep going that way and using heat guns and hairdryers and things like that to make sure the paint sets right. But even then, I would say there's a lot more incidents of paint having to be redone between October and March than there is at any other time of year. So this is going to be something that you can do completely in your living room while pretending to watch something on Netflix that somebody's been telling you that you should watch because they think that you'll like it, and you can just have it on in the background while you do this, and then you can go back to them and say you've been watching it, and hopefully they'll shut up about it and not want to go too deep into like the plot lines and things like that. So yeah, it's a standard mirror polish, just working down through all the different grades, but interspersing it with the metal toothbrush. I don't know why, that seems to just work. That seems to work on Corgi metal more than anything else, and I've no idea why. Just like randomly reintroducing the metal toothbrush, specifically the gold one out of the two, because I think that's got brass bristles, softer. It just seems to benefit from having that done to it periodically and then go at it again with the different sanding pads going down through the grades. But the result's the same. We end up with this fairly chrome-like looking thing. And I'm going to apply the Spectraflame paint. First of all, I'm just going to do the little stripe at the sides because it's just in its little depression. So we can just fill that up with smoke grey. It's very similar to what we were doing with when we put the wash on the grill of the Ranchero and the Mercury Cyclone a few months ago now. But then turn it over. Like I say, gravity's on your side. You need the sides to be completely facing upwards, so they're like a flat surface. And then you can just introduce the Spectraflame paint, well, the Tamiya Clear. I'm using Tamiya Clear Yellow on this one because I've done a million reds, and I think I used blue on the last one, so it's yellow's turn, basically. And yellow is one of the trickiest ones to get right because it's not like blue. Red's the easiest. Blue is quite tricky because it's quite thick and cloudy, and you can go past the shade of blue that you want very quickly. And as I've said before, you end up with just this nice blue that makes no use of the fact that you've mirror polished it, because you can't really see that anymore because it's kind of obscured by the darkness and the opacity of the blue that you've put on there. Yellow's different. Yellow's somewhere in between because you don't really... it can get darker and darker. It can progress towards being more of an orange or almost like a russet colour if you really, really put it on, like thick, which you wouldn't do. You wouldn't put it on that thick because it wouldn't be practical to have something with paint so thick on it. So it's not so much that you're in danger of going past it being Spectraflame yellow. It's just, compared with red, it can settle a little bit unevenly, and when it settles in corners, it tends to look darker compared with the rest of the yellow paint that you've put on there, more so than you'd get with the red. So it's sort of in between. It's not quite as tricky. Well, it's a different kind of tricky to the blue, but it's certainly not as easy as red. So I thought that would be a good one just to demonstrate this on. So as you can see, I'm just applying it with a cocktail stick, just literally flood it, like irrigating each panel of the car. I've mentioned it before, but Tamiya Clear is very good at sort of self-leveling, so you don't need to worry about what the surface of the finish is going to look like with this. All you've got to do is just make sure that you don't really get the paint collecting too much in one area, and also that you don't get it on too thick, because it will take forever to properly harden and cure, and it'll always be susceptible to fingerprints and indentations from anything that it comes up against if you get it on too thick. So I've done the sides of the X19 now. We can't do anything more with those until they've completely cured. So that's just going to be left strapped to the sides of that box in its safety webbing until such time as it's actually completely dried, and then we can take it down, put it flat, and do the rest of the paint. while we're waiting for that to happen, I may as well just do that very same thing on this square body, because I said before when I first took all these apart that a lot of its original paint's under there, and I'm just going to try something with it. I don't know if this is actually going to turn out to look any good or not. What I'm hoping to do is just utilise what remains of the original metallic green, because it was quite a nice metal flake sort of green that they'd put on there, and combine that with the yellow. Won't change the green from being green. It should still be green at the end, but then the bits that I've flayed and polished up should be like yellow stripes. I'm hoping that'll be the case anyway. But either way, even if this doesn't work out all that spectacular, it's fine for actually showing you the technique, because you can see I'm just kind of flooding the surface. If you tilt it and a lot of it collects in the corner like that, then that's a sign that you need to get some off. And you can just take that bit of paint off that's kind of collected there, and you can redistribute that somewhere else. You don't even need to waste it. And then once you're satisfied with the roof, you move on to the front and start doing the same thing with that. And it is just like literally get some onto your cocktail stick and irrigate. You don't have to do it like this. You can do it with a brush. And I always put the second coat on with a brush, because you do need to do more than one coat with this. Do not try. If you're going to be trying to apply Spectraflame paint to either bare or painted metal using just your hand and a cocktail stick rather than an airbrush, which is probably the best way to do it, really. But you can get just as good a result as this as long as you're prepared to really faff about. But it's the fun kind of faffing about. Just, you need patience with it, that's all. So get it on there. Try not to get it on there too thick. Don't actually, and certainly do not attempt to do it all in one coat. You will not get all this done in one coat. If you've put it on thick enough to be able to give it a decent, convincing kind of consistent finish and colour all the way through without any kind of bits that look too pale, then you've got to get some areas where it will collect and just be too dark and too thick and just look absolutely horrible. Anyway, going back to Danger Mouse's car, as I keep calling it, I mean, it doesn't look anything like Danger Mouse's car. It's sort of the same kind of wedge shape, I suppose, and it's similar kind of area, and it's just a little bit mental looking, I suppose. So, I don't know, maybe it's Danger Mouse's spare car or something. But, yeah, it's actually the Matchbox Tanzara, that's its actual name. But that was so dangerously close to being completed that I thought we may as well just do it. All it really needed was just the chrome. Now, my Molotov chrome pen is officially defunct as a pen. I don't know what happened to the nib. It just self-destructed. It no longer works in that capacity. But you can still pump a load of liquid chrome out, and the liquid chrome is just as good applied with a cocktail stick as it is with the actual nib of the pen. So it lives on. It's just it's not really a pen anymore. It's more like a reservoir of liquid chrome. It probably takes slightly longer doing it with the cocktail stick, but you can actually be a little bit more accurate with it, so there is a bit of a payoff. So this is what the X19 looked like the morning after, when the yellow that we got. So we can see the effect is there, it's getting there. It's not perfect, but I mean it's not got its second coat yet. There was a couple of areas where it just went on a little bit too thick, so I'm just sanding a little bit off. This is what I mean by the faffing about. You've really got to be patient and build it up carefully. So sand it off and go over it with lapping film and things like that in between coats. Then when you put the second coat on, yeah, you can get the brush out at this point. The reason I don't use the brush for the first coat is you can just be a little bit more accurate with the cocktail stick in terms of where it goes. Whereas when you're applying the second coat, you are just giving it a bit of a glance over, really. And it's not just that, but it's not as bad if the brush leaves any hairs behind. You can sand those off, and it's a lot better sanding them off from the second coat than it is from trying to sand them off the first coat, because if you're trying to sand them off the first coat, you may well just end up sanding all of the paint off and going right back to the beginning. So I always just think first coat, cocktail stick, second coat, well, any subsequent coats really, it's up to you. You can either use the cocktail stick again or use a brush. But this probably isn't even the last coat for this one. There'll be more to come than this. Anyway, that's where we are after a few hours. So, and now it looks horrible again, because what we did with the square body, I've now done with that. I've flooded the top surfaces, but when that dries, it will look different again, and we'll be able to do what we're doing here now with the square body, which is sanding off that first coat. And then when you apply the second coat with a brush, it should go on more or less, certainly in terms of the finish and the consistency, it should go on more or less perfectly like it is doing here. So we'll give this its 24 hours to dry along with the Fiat, and we'll take up with those in the next episode and hopefully get those two to the point where the paint's actually complete. So the Matchbox Tanzara is complete. This is it next to the original Redline Firebird that I wanted to try and emulate the paint of. I know it's not a mint example, but it is just one that I want to preserve as it is. With it being an original Redline, you don't come across them that much in this country, and the Spectraflame effect still works quite beautifully on it. You can still see what it's all about with the light just dancing across the bare metal underneath the red paint. I won't say I've absolutely emulated it with this Tanzara, because the paint's ended up too thick and glossy anyway. It's got elements of it. The colour's not a million miles off, and it was rough sanded in a similar way, so the light does play upon it in a slightly similar fashion. But overall, I'd say what I've got here is something that's halfway between the Redline Spectraflame red and that sort of really nice candy red that Matchbox used to do in the 70s and 80s. Anyway, so seeing as I'm a very big fan of both of those colours and finishes, I don't think I've really got anything to get too upset about by coming up with something that's a combination of the two. So certainly for me personally, this has turned out easily as good as, or if not better than I'd originally hoped. So this one can join the Seaver Spider and the Green 911 in the completed club. And then next time we'll rejoin the X19, the square body, and see how they're getting on with the hand-applied yellow Spectraflame paint. And there'll be other things as well, no doubt. Thanks for watching.